Hey guys, so here we are at last. We're going to be dealing with the Brian Koberger probable cause affidavit. I'm going to kick off immediately with the document. It's 19 pages long, so let's get started. I'm going to put it up on the screen like so, and let's get going. Just a quick hello to those of you who are here. Terry Dean, glad to see you here. Sorry that I'm about 5 minutes late, but better late than never. Let's get going. So it says, this is the first of 19 pages. The below information is provided by Brett Payne, who is a duly appointed, qualified, and acting peace officer within the county of Lata, state of Idaho. He's employed by the Moscow Police Department in the official capacity of or position of corporal, and has been trained and qualified peace officer for 4 years. And then this is really where it starts. On October 13, 2022, at approximately 4 p.m., Moscow Police Department Sergeant Blaker and I, so this is his narrative. This is Brett Payne's narrative. So him and Sergeant Blaker responded to 112 King Road quite late, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, year after the King Road residents to assist with scene security and processing of a crime scene associated with 4 homicides. Upon arrival, the Idaho State Police ISP forensic team was on scene and was preparing to begin processing the scene. So that is quite fast. That is quite a quick. If you think about it, they're processing the scene within about 2 or 3 hours of arriving there. Compare that to the Kylie Rodney case, a lot more time had passed. MPD Officer Smith, one of the initial responding officers to the incident, advised he would walk me through the scene. So now you're going to get a gritty, visceral sense what it was like to actually be inside that house on November 13, right, a couple of hours after the incident. And obviously, this is in the afternoon. You're actually getting a sense now of what the perpetrator did and what he left behind. So let's just take a moment to pause on that thought. Officer Smith and I entered the King Road residence through the bottom floor door on the north side of the building. So that's obviously the main front door. They don't really say whether they entered a key code, nothing here about the door being open. Officer Smith and I then walked upstairs to the second floor. So they didn't do anything on the ground floor. They didn't look in the bedrooms of the survivors. They don't mention any evidence, any footprints or shoe prints or anything that is disarray or out of order on that ground floor. In other words, the crime scene was only the second floor and the third floor, and of course, the bedrooms inside and probably beyond those bedrooms. So it says here, Officer Smith directed me down the hallway to the west bedroom on the second floor, which I later learned through Xana Canodal's driver's license and other personal belongings found in the room. Do you guys want me to make this a little bit bigger? As I approached the room, I could see a body, later identified as Canodal's, laying on the floor. So here you have the first discrepancy with what we've heard from the media. We heard from the media that someone was lying on, they were all on beds, right? And remember, I said, in order for that blood to come out the wall, something had to be different there. Either someone wasn't on the bed or something else, right? So there you have the first discrepancy from what we heard from the media. So I think that's Xana's body lying on the floor. Canodal was deceased with wounds which appeared to have been caused by an edged weapon, right, a knife. Also in the room was a male later identified as Ethan Chapin, year after Chapin. Chapin was also deceased with wounds later determined. And looks like that is all redacted. maybe not. That's probably a photograph that used to be there. So the narrative continues to be caused by sharp force injuries. It's interesting how Zaina's is described as an edged weapon, and the other one is sharp force injuries. It's really the same thing. I then followed Officer Smith upstairs to the third floor of the residence. I've got to say, as narratives go, this is already very basic, very little, there's very little so far. We've just learned that one person was lying on the floor. Does it actually say that Ethan was on the bed? I don't think it does. Also in the room was a male. It doesn't say whether he was on the bed or not. And this also doesn't say anything about, was there a struggle in the room? Were things broken? Were there shoe prints, anything like that? Anyway, or were there shoe prints going out? And also they don't go from there to the bathroom. Maybe some other officer does. We're now on page 3. I then followed Officer Smith upstairs to the third floor of the residence. The third floor consisted of 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom, obviously also the balcony. The bedroom on the west side of the floor was later determined to be Kaylee Consalve's, hereafter Consalve's room. I later learned from a review of Officer Noon's body camera that there was a dog in the room when Moscow police officers initially responded. So that's quite interesting. So that's where the dog was. Actually makes sense that Kaylee's dog was in Kaylee's room, and also that it was to some extent sequestrated from the entire crime scene. If the dog had been any other point, like in the middle floor or the lower floor, you would actually imagine it may have barked, it may have done something. It was actually almost in the furthest point from the survivor's point of view to be of any signal value, if that makes sense. So still no comment about any blood trail in the stairs. Did you notice anything on the stairs? They don't say anything about what was in the room or not in the room besides the dog being in the room. The dog belonged to Gonsalves and her ex-boyfriend, Jack Ducour. I found out from my interview with Jack Ducour on November 13 that he and Gonsalves share the dog. Quite a lot of information about the dog. What are you seeing right in front of you? Officer Smith then pointed out a small bathroom, right, on the east side of the third floor. This bathroom shared a wall with Madison Mogan's, hereafter Mogan's bedroom, which was situated on the southeast corner of the third floor. Now, it's important to stress the first crime scene that is sort of dealt with, the first bedroom that is dealt with, is on the west side of the house. It's on the left side of the kitchen as you're looking at the sliding door. If you are looking at the front door of 1122 King Road, it's on the right-hand side of the whole house. The other room, the room belonging to Madison, is on the very top of the house on the left side, right? It's important to stress that these rooms are on opposite sides of the building. So it says this bathroom shared a wall with Madison Mogan's, hereafter Mogan bedroom, which was situated on the southeast. As I entered this bedroom, I could see 2 females in the single bed in the room. So here you already have a difference. And the difference here is in Madison's room, that both victims are found in the bed, right? Which suggests that that was quite a rapid attack, and also I think it suggests that it was the first attack. And if you contrast that bedroom, that let's call it that crime scene, with the crime scene below, at least one of the victims wasn't in bed, which seems to indicate someone had woken up and there was defensive wounds there. Although he hasn't mentioned anything about that. It's still quite a long way to go. We'll see if he touches on that. It says here, both Gonsalves and Mogan were deceased with visible stab wounds. Now, I think it goes without saying that I think he could see immediately, he could see instantly that the victims were deceased, that there's no way they could have survived what had happened to them. There wasn't any thing of, should we perform CPR, or are you sure? I think it was absolutely obvious from the wounds and from the scene in the room that they were deceased, right? I also later noticed what appeared to be a tan leather knife sheath. That is really incredible. That's a big insight. A tan leather knife sheath laying on the bed next to Mogan's right side. So obviously the killer didn't go inside the house carrying a knife in his hand. It was something like a knife sheath that was part of his belt or part of his outfit. And it looks like that sheath was pulled off of him or somehow came apart from him. And that's already a piece of evidence left at the scene, right? I definitely agree with that. It definitely is a wow. Yeah, that definitely is a wow. So that also, I think, helps to help them to very quickly be able to identify the murder weapon, that it was a K-bar USMC, United States Marine Corps Eagle Globe and anchor insignia stamped on the outside of it. And on that alone, you could actually have the killer's DNA. Does that make sense? Just him leaving behind that sheath, it could mean that he's left his DNA or clothing fibers or something like that. Oh, there it actually says the Idaho State Lab later located a single source of male DNA left on the button snap of the knife sheath. There it is. There it is. It's basically game over, probably in the very first room. Right, that's pretty incredible. So that's a first source of DNA, and I'm pretty sure that they found others as well. Male DNA, single source male DNA on the button snap of the knife sheath. Okay. As part of the investigation, numerous interviews were conducted by Moscow PD officers, Idaho State police detectives, and FBI agents. Two of the interviews included who do you think that who's? Oh, it's the survivors, right? B and D. Right, so I'm not going to say their names. Both B and D were inside the King Road residence at the time of the homicides and were roommates to the victims. BF's bedroom, so B's bedroom was located on the east side, so directly below, vertically below Madison's bedroom. And D's bedroom, I presume, was directly below Xana's bedroom. Does that make sense? So now we're going to get the survivor's story, that what their official statement is. We're now on page 4. Based on numerous interviews conducted by MPD officers, ISP detectives, and FBI, I've learned the following. On the evening of November 12, Chapin and Kernodle are seen by B at the Sigma Chi House at the University of Idaho campus from approximately 9 to 1:45 a.m. So they spent almost the entire time in one location. The surviving roommate also estimated that at about 1:45, they came back to the King Road residence. Chapin did not live in the residence, but was a guest of Kernodle. And it goes without saying, but nobody else returned with them. And I suppose what that may mean is that they knew that they arrived at this time. In other words, surely B was still awake when Ethan and Xana arrived home. Does that make sense? They were both awake when B was awake. D probably wasn't awake. Then it says Gonzalez and Mogan were at a local bar, the Corner Club in Moscow. Gonzalez and Mogan can be seen on video footage provided by the Corner Club between 10 and 1:30. So they were also just there, just at the Corner Club on that football night for basically 3.5 hours. At about 1:30, it's not quite as accurate as we'd like it. Remember, we saw that screen grab, which I think was 1:32. So we really like an exact time, but at around about 1:30, they can be seen on a video at a local food vendor called the Grub Truck. That's now the famous video. The Grub Truck live streams video from their food truck on the streaming platform Twitch, which is available for public viewing on their website. This video was captured by law enforcement. A private party reported that he provided a ride to Gonzalez at approximately 1:56 a.m. from downtown Moscow to the King Road residence. None of this is really news to us. Just to note that they were in front of the Grub Truck for around about 20 minutes. Did somebody see them standing there? Was somebody following them? Or was somebody waiting somewhere else? Then B and D both made statements during interviews that the occupants of the King Road residence were home at 2 a.m. and asleep, or at least in their rooms, by about 4 a.m. Now, what that suggests is kind of a situation where they were at least awake enough. It's not like they were so fast asleep that they didn't hear anything. They were awake enough to hear all four of their roommates returning. That's quite a big statement to say, yeah, we can tell you that they arrived home at this time. And we can also tell you that they were likely asleep by 4 o'clock. So that's quite interesting. Home by 4 and asleep by about 4 a.m. So that's already, can you see it's pushing the time of the crime to very close to 4 a.m. Do you see that? This was with the exception of Conodal, who received a DoorDash order at the residence at about 4 a.m., right? Law enforcement identified the DoorDash delivery driver who reported this information. So that's something we just didn't know, that there was somebody who did arrive at the house following the dropping off of Maddie and Kaylee, right? We didn't know that. And can you imagine this guy could actually have intercepted the killer? This guy could have bumped into the killer. This guy could have been killed himself. That was at 4 a.m. So now it's starting to look like the crime happened actually even after 4 o'clock, doesn't it? Dee says she originally went to sleep in a bedroom on the southeast side of the second floor. Dee said she was woken at about 4 by what she stated sounded like Gonzalez playing with her dog. I thought she would have heard something. I thought couldn't have possibly have been, I didn't absolutely hear anything. I thought it was very likely that they heard something but just dismissed it as kids running around the house. So she actually thought Gonzalez was playing with her dog in one of the upstairs bedrooms. And you can, if you imagine that, and I hate to be this graphic, but if you can imagine what she's actually talking about there, what does it sound like when you play with a dog? Well, there's the scrape of feet on wood or on a surface, but a dog can also make kind of squeaky noise. I know my dog does that, and so maybe she actually mistook the sounds, those sort of muffled sounds of screaming, for a dog's excitement. That sounds like what has actually happened. Do you agree with that? So it's actually quite tragic that Dee did actually hear something, but you can kind of understand that because there was so much noise and so much activity, didn't really think anything of it. A short time later, Dee said she heard who she thought was Gonzalez say something to the effect of, "There's someone here." That's also incredible. She actually heard, she thought it was Kaylee's voice saying, "There's someone here." A review of records obtained from a forensic download of Conodal's phone showed this could also have been Conodal, as her phone indicated she was likely awake and using the TikTok app at about 4:12 a.m. So looks like Xana was awake as late as 4:12. So if you had the killer waiting out there for his time to strike, he actually had to wait quite a long time. He could probably see the illumination of the cell phone from the outside, right? And I think what they're trying to say here is that Kaylee thought she heard someone and assumed that it could have been Xana. Is that how you guys understand it? Okay. So let's go on to the next paragraph. I must say this really adds so much detail that we didn't really expect. Dee stated she looked out of her bedroom but did not see anything when she heard the comment about someone being in the house. Now, what I presume that means is she looked out the bedroom door. I don't think it means she looked out the bedroom window. I think she peeked out into the hallway. she said she opened, oh, there it is. She opened her door a second time when she heard what she thought was crying coming from Knodl's room. Well, that really is quite tragic. Dee then said she heard a male voice say something to the effect of, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." Well, that's heartbreaking, isn't it? That is probably Ethan's voice. Do you guys agree with that? That it's probably Ethan saying, "Listen, it's going to be okay. I'm going to try and help you." I really doubt whether that is the killer saying that to her. But this shows you that very early on, Dee heard something. And so why did it take so long to report this until 12? At approximately 4:17 a.m., a security camera, here we go, here's some evidence. Security camera located at 1112 King Road, a resident immediately to the northwest of 1122 King Road, picked up distorted audio, right? That's a CCTV camera. I think it's a Ring doorbell. Distorted audio of what sounded like voices or a whimper, followed by a loud thud. A dog can also be heard barking numerous times, starting at 4:17 a.m. So the dog did bark. 4:17 a.m. So that seems to be the time that this happened, 4:17 a.m. The security camera is less than 50 feet from the west wall of Knodl's bedroom. That's incredible. There's a security camera less than 50 feet from the west wall of Knodl's bedroom. As far as I can understand, that is like on that elevated parking platform. Dee says she opened her door for the third time after she heard the crying and saw a figure clad in black clothing and a mask. Well, there you have it. That's pretty astonishing. She saw a figure clad in black clothing and a mask that covered the person's mouth and nose walking towards her. DEM described the figure as 5'10" or taller, male, not very muscular, but athletically built with bushy eyebrows. How's that for a description? So someone actually intercepted the killer. So the whole fact that he went into a house with 6 people in it, he didn't actually manage to come out without anyone knowing. Still think he's a serial killer. Exactly. Why not call the police right then and there? So there's your description. 5'10" or taller, and Brian Koberger is 6 foot tall. So that's almost exactly as tall as she's saying. Not very muscular. Brian's not very muscular. Athletically built, is quite thin, and he does have bushy eyebrows. The male walked past Dee as she stood in a frozen, shocked face. That is absolutely incredible. So she was frozen in shock, and for whatever reason, the killer decided that's enough. The male walked, oh, there we have it. The male walked towards the back sliding glass door. So it seems like he was going to exit through the front door. And then when he saw Dee, he didn't really, walked past Dee and exited through the black back sliding glass door. I don't quite understand that. I don't know if it means he made a U-turn and went the other way, but that's not what they say here. It seems like the killer literally walked past Dee, like you would imagine brushed by her as she stood frozen. But then where was she relative to the door? So one would really need to map this out. He walked towards, and this is also quite incredible, he walked past DM and then walked towards the black backsliding glass door. Is that the right word? Walk. Dee locked herself in her room after seeing the male. Dee did not state that she recognized the male. This leads investigators to believe that the murderer left the scene. So that's incredible. You actually had one of the surviving roommates actually have a face-to-face encounter where she even saw the guy's eyebrows. Face-to-face, maybe even brushed by her. And so why do you think the killer didn't continue? It's actually a witness. Why did he not continue? Had he lost his nerve at this point? The other thing that's really interesting is she says she didn't recognize him, which means it might mean that he'd never actually attended a party there. It may mean he'd attended a party before they'd moved in. Then they moved in there in August, mid-August. We do know that Brian Kober was spotted 1.5 miles from the house at about 20 to midnight on the 21st of August. So who knows what that was all about. I tend to agree with that. I don't know if this case is going to be such a tough case to prosecute at this point, but we'll see. The combination of D's statements to law enforcement, reviews of forensic downloads of records from B and D's phone, and video of a suspect video as described below, so we're going to deal with that, leads investigators to believe the homicides occurred between 4 and 4:25 a.m. Now, I would say almost all of us were wrong on that, but in part because that's what the police told us. The police told us between 3 and 4. I've always thought it was closer to 4. Well, now it turns out that it was likely 4:17 a.m. Very, very late in the morning. Some people get up to jog at that time. One wonders how long the killer was waiting out there. Anyway, during the processing of the crime scene, investigators found a latent shoe print. I knew that was going to happen. And it's quite interesting that they just say latent shoe print. Is that all that they found? Just one print. So you may have had a situation that the killer committed the crimes, commenced washing up, and then it was a situation of, oh no, I've encountered another housemate. I don't have time or the incentive or the intention to kill another person. I'm going to wash up again. You could literally have had that situation. Oh no, I can't kill another person, and I'm going to wash up again. And isn't there another roommate as well, right? Again, does this sound like a very sophisticated criminal with experience? Doesn't it sound like someone who's actually lost their nerve at the end of the day? He's lost the sheath of his knife, and he has left, it looks like, a shoe print. This was located during the second processing of the crime scene by the ISP forensic team. That's quite interesting. They only located the shoe print during the second processing of the crime scene. So here you are walking through the crime scene and you're not noticing things you should be noticing. And guess what? You're stepping over, you're leaving shoe prints of your own that can be destroying evidence. We don't know whether these investigators put on booties. That's not mentioned. Anyway, and we also don't know if they went into any of the bathrooms. It says there was a ISP forensic team that did a presumptive blood test and then amino black, a protein stain that detects the presence of cellular material. I think that's similar to luminol. Anyway, the detective shoe print showed a diamond-shaped pattern. Fascinating. Some reminds me of the Amanda Knox case and the John Benet Ramsey case. So they actually found a diamond-shaped pattern similar to the patterns of the Vans type shoe sole. So they're actually able to identify the kind of shoe. Also happened in the O.J. Simpson case, just outside the door of Dee's bedroom. That is absolutely terrifying. The fact that the killer was standing just outside the door of Dee's bedroom, and Dee at this point was awake, ambulant, standing there, frozen, but very much alert and probably able to defend herself. It's actually quite interesting that it says here Dee's bedroom was on the second floor. So Dee was actually sleeping on the second floor. Okay, now it makes sense how the killer, why the killer went out the kitchen sliding door. Now it makes sense. Okay. So this is consistent with Dee's statement regarding the suspect's path of travel. Okay. Now we also understand why those golf clubs were in the room at the bottom on the right of the door. No one was really using that room. Okay, now it makes sense. It actually makes sense that the girls would prefer to live higher up in the house than lower down, where the cars were and the doors were, people coming in and out. Okay, let's continue. As part of the investigation, an extensive search, commonly referred to in law enforcement as a video canvass, that is looking for CCTV footage, was conducted in the area of the King Road residence. This video canvass was to obtain any footage from the early morning hours of November 13, 2022 in the area of the King Road residence and surrounding neighborhoods in an effort to locate the suspects or suspect vehicles traveling to or leaving from the King Road residence. Now, we already know that there was a camera 40 foot from Madison's room, didn't that? And that camera picked up barking noises and a loud thud. Didn't that also pick up the sound of a car? The sound of a car, maybe also the lights of a car. This video canvas resulted in the collection of numerous surveillance videos in the area from both residential and business addresses. I've reviewed numerous videos that were collected and have had conversations with other MPD officers, ISP detectives, FBI agents that are similarly reviewing footage that was obtained. Before we continue, do you remember there was a time where we thought, wow, law enforcement don't have anything. Law enforcement don't have a suspect. Well, on day one, they already had the guy's height, eyebrows, body type, the murder weapon, his shoe print, all of that basically on day one, right? Quite a lot of evidence. So they were obviously minimizing what they knew, playing things close to their chest. A review of camera footage indicated that a white sedan, hereafter suspect vehicle 1, was observed traveling westbound in the 700 block of Indian Hills Drive in Moscow at approximately 3:26 a.m., right? So it's traveling westbound at 3:26 and then westbound on Steiner Avenue. That was exactly the route that I thought it would take. It turned west onto Steiner at the Idaho State Highway 95 in Moscow. That's near the Food Mart, what do you call it, convenience store. So that is actually the time that the killer drove there, about an hour before he committed the crime. So he drove there at 3:26. He must have waited for approximately an hour in his car, trying to wait probably for the lights to go out. On this video, it appeared suspect vehicle 1 was not displaying a front license plate. It's quite interesting. So if you think the killer, in some ways, is obviously inexperienced and nervous, but in others, maybe quite clever, he removed his license plate. He took that issue out of the equation. A review of footage from multiple videos obtained from the King Road neighborhood showed multiple sightings of suspect vehicle 1 starting at 3:29 a.m. and ending at 4:20. So it basically means he went there at about 3:30 in the morning and left shortly after 4:17. That's when he drove away. So it's really, and that's also, I think, kind of dumb. He was really hanging around the area for about an hour. And I think that may indicate he may have done that before, hung around, lurked around. These sightings show suspect vehicle 1 makes an initial 3 passes. Wow, that's interesting. 3 passes by 1122 King Road and then left via Willenta Drive. So that's also something we spoke about, was that you could literally drive around the residence and see what is going on inside. You could literally drive around, drive to the elevated parking area from your vehicle, see inside the residence, because it's like a fishbowl. And that's exactly what the killer did do. If the lights are on, you can see inside. You can see who's there. You can see what's going on. You can be level with Maddie's bedroom and Xana's bed and Kaylee's bedroom. Think about that from the perspective of a leering problem person. The fact that you can actually see right into your bedroom, what that's going to do to someone like that's going to make them even more agitated about whatever they're feeling agitated about. Anyway, it says, based off of my experience as a patrol officer, this is a residential neighborhood with a very limited number of vehicles that travel in the area during the early morning hours. So this is how, there's another big error, how his vehicle totally stood out. Vehicles shouldn't be driving around there. There were a lot of kids walking around, and so this vehicle did stand out. Upon review of the video, there are only a few cars that enter and exit this area during this time frame. So what this was already telling them was that the killer wasn't really from that neighborhood, and also potentially not from Moscow. So it was originally like not from this neighborhood, otherwise he could have walked. Not from this side of town, which means maybe he's not a student, or maybe he's not a student at the University of Idaho. And that turned out to be true, right? Suspect vehicle one can be seen entering the area fourth time at approximately 4:04 a.m. Oh, so he wasn't just parked somewhere lurking, he was driving and driving again. So he basically made 4 circuits, and did anyone actually see this car keeping, doing its thing? That also shows intentionality, that this is definitely premeditated, that he decided what he's going to do and how he's going to do it, how he was going to monitor. We also know that from the way he was dressed. He was trying not to leave behind DNA. Of course, leaving behind a clothing item is going to leave behind DNA, like a knife sheath. It can be seen driving eastbound on King Road, stopping and turning around in front of 500 Queen Road, number 52, then driving back westbound on King Road. When suspect vehicle one is in front of the King Road residence, it appeared to unsuccessfully attempt to park or turn around in the road. The vehicle then continued to the intersection of Queen Road and King Road, where it can be seen completing a 3-point turn and then driving eastbound again down Queen Road. So lots of activity in his car, and all of it was actually being recorded. Suspect vehicle one is next seen departing the area of the King Road residence at approximately 4:20 a.m. at a high rate of speed. You did get the sense, and maybe that's also why the front door was open, you did get the sense that he left there in a hurry, almost as though he botched the crime. That was something else I suggested, that the reason that front door is open is, didn't he botch the crime? The reason that the survivors survived, didn't he botch the crime? The dog barking, was that something that he anticipated? Did he anticipate bumping into, it seems like literally brushing by D in the hallway, and then that is why he had to get out of there so quickly? You can almost imagine if D wasn't ambulant, either he would have killed her as well, or he would have left calmly and quietly. Okay. It seems like B wasn't really aware of this. D was ambulant, but D was on the same floor as 2 of the other victims. Okay. Based on my knowledge of, so I believe that suspect vehicle one likely exited the neighborhood at Palouse River Drive and Conestoga Drive. I think that is to the south. That's why they wanted all that footage from that bottom square. I remember thinking, why are you guys so interested in that square? If he came from this area, well, they must have known something. And here it is. Palouse River Drive is at the southern edge of Moscow and proceeds into Whitman County, Washington. There you have it. Eventually, the road leads to Pullman, Washington. There you have it. Not such a long walk in the park, is it? Pullman, Washington is approximately 10 miles from Moscow. Both Pullman and Moscow are small college towns, and people commonly travel back and forth between them. Law enforcement officers provided video footage of suspect vehicle one to forensic examiners with the FBI that regularly utilized surveillance footage to identify the make, year, model of an unknown vehicle that is observed by 1 or more cameras. The forensic examiner has approximately 35 years law enforcement experience, with 12 years at the FBI. His specific training includes identifying unique characteristics of vehicles. And he uses a database that gives visual clues of vehicles across states. After reviewing numerous observations, the forensic examiner believed the suspect vehicle was a 2011 to 2013 Hyundai Elantra. But upon further review, he said it could actually be 2011 to 2016, and what it turned out to be 2015. Obviously, they didn't update us with that, but it was nevertheless accurate at a certain point in time. As a result, investigators have been reviewing information on persons in possession of a vehicle that is 2011 to 2016. Investigators were given access to video footage on the Washington State University campus. A review of that video indicated that approximately 2:44 a.m., a white sedan, well, it just looks like they have followed the killer from where he started to the crime, in the crime, out the crime, all the way back to Washington. What part did they miss? What part don't they have of the puzzle? I've been saying it's really hard to commit a crime these days with CCTVs everywhere. Anyway, I mean, even the grub truck streaming, CCTV coverage. It was observed on WSU surveillance cameras traveling north on Southeast Nevada Street at Northwest Stadium Way. At 2:53 a.m., a white sedan, consistent with the description of this Elantra, known as Suspect Vehicle 1, traveled southeast on Nevada Street in Pullman towards SR 270. SR 270 connects Pullman to Moscow, Idaho. This camera footage from Pullman was provided to the same FBI forensic examiner. The forensic examiner identified the vehicle observed as being a 2014, so that's narrowing it down, to 2016 Hyundai Elantra. Subtleties in the different years, right? Very subtle differences. At about 5:25 a.m., a white sedan consistent with the description was observed on 5 cameras in Pullman, Washington. The first camera that recorded it was located on that road, Johnson Road, and we're obviously going to map this when we can. Johnson Road leads directly back to West Belouse River Drive in Moscow, which intersects with the Conestoga Drive. I don't know if I'm saying it right. The white sedan was then observed turning south on Bishop Boulevard and northwest on SR 270. At about 5:27, the white Elantra was observed on cameras traveling northbound on Stadium Way at Nevada Street, at Wilson Road, Stadium Way at Cougar Way, and then depiction showing Moscow and Pullman, showing just how they tracked this vehicle. It's not very clear here. And so basically, I think they were able to track the vehicle basically from 112 King Road to not only the university, but basically to very close to where, possibly where Koberger lived. Let's see what it says here. November 25th, this is 12 days later, less than 2 weeks later, MPD asked area law enforcement agencies to be on the lookout for a white Hyundai in the area. Just 4 days later, 12:28 a.m., WSU police officer Daniel Tingo queried white Elantras registered at WSU. Just as a result of that query, so simple, he located a 2015 white Elantra with a Pennsylvania license plate LVZ8649 that was subsequently changed. Brian Koberger. So it seems like they knew by the 25th that they'd made the first connection to Brian Koberger within 12 days. This vehicle was registered to Brian Koberger, residing at 1630 Any Valley Road, apartment 201, Pullman. 1630 Any Valley Road is approximately 3/4 of a mile from the intersection of Stadium Way and Cougar Way. Last camera location that picked up the white Elantra. As I said, they literally tracked this vehicle from its home to the crime scene and back. No problem. The vehicle was something that gave the killer away. The eyebrows have given the killer away. His shoe print has given the killer away. His DNA has given the killer away. But all those things in isolation could probably have given him away. Anyway, that same day at 12:58 a.m., so on the 29th, WSU officer Curtis Whitman was looking for a white Hyundai and located one at 1630 Valley Road in Pullman in the parking lot. He was looking for one and he found one in the parking lot. And it was part of an apartment complex that houses WSU students. Officer Whitman also ran the car and it returned to Koberger with a Washington tag. I reviewed Koberger's WA state driver license information and photograph. This license indicates that Koberger is a white male with a height of 6 foot, so he meets the description of a tall guy, taller than 5'10", weighs 185 pounds. In other words, fairly light. He's not heavy. Additionally, the photograph of Koberger shows that he has bushy eyebrows. There you go. Koberger's physical description is consistent with the description of the male D said she saw inside the King Road residence on November 13th. Further investigation, including a review of later County Sheriff's Deputy Corporal Duke's body camera report, showed that on August 21st, 2022, Brian Koberger was detained as part of a traffic stop. I mentioned that in my previous video by Corporal Duke. At the time, Koberger was a sole occupant. He was driving a white 2015 Elantra with same plates at this point, LFZ 8649, set to expire November 30th, 2022. During the stop, which is recorded by a law enforcement body camera, so there's more body cam, Koberger provided his phone number, and investigators conducted, that's incredible. So they already had his phone number, so they could use that phone number. Instead of getting all the phone numbers and all the pings from the tower, they could basically take this number, which they already had, and run it through their systems through AT&T. On October 14, Brian was detained as part of a traffic stop by a WSU police officer. Is that another one? Upon review of that body cam and report of the stop, Koberger was the sole occupant. Is that another thing? On November 18, according to WA licensing, Koberger registered the 2015 Elantra with WA and later received, so there it is, CFB 8708, that is a B. That was 5 days after the crime. I also mentioned that in my previous video. And that does not require a front license plate to be displayed. This was learned through communications with a Pennsylvania officer. Investigators believe that Koberger is still driving the 2015 white Elantra. With Caitlin Armstrong, she disposed of her vehicle pretty quickly. Same with Vicky White. Koberger didn't do that. And why didn't he do that? Well, maybe he couldn't afford to do that, but you've got to say, wasn't that a big mistake to hang on to your vehicle in this case? To use a vehicle to commit a crime and then still hang on to it and be around in that area. But then you also possibly had the same thing in the Delphi case. Koberger's Elantra was then queried on December 15. There you go, a month later, after the crime, by law enforcement in Hancock County, Indiana. On December 16 at 2:26 p.m., surveillance video showed his Elantra in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania. So again, surveillance video. The sole occupant of the vehicle was a white male whose description was consistent with Koberger. Koberger has family in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania. And that was learned through a TLO search and locate tool database query. Based on information provided on the WSU website, Koberger is currently a PhD student in criminology at the Washington State University. Pursuant to records provided by a member of the interview panel for Pullman Police Department, we learned that Koberger's past education included undergraduate degrees in psychology and cloud-based forensics. These records also showed Koberger wrote an essay when he applied for an internship with the Pullman Police Department in the fall of 2022. So while he actually applied to work at Pullman PD in the winter or in the fall of 2022, months later, he would commit, allegedly committed quadruple murder. Makes you wonder whether he wanted to be a police officer and commit the murder. Like, isn't there someone who did that? Thanks a lot, Karina. The lights are due to go out here in 5 minutes, so if I suddenly disappear, that is what has happened. I don't know if you guys know that his sister, Koberger's sister, apparently acted in a horror movie. I'll talk to you guys about that when I've got some time. Anyway, Koberger wrote in his essay an interest in assisting rural law enforcement agencies with how to better collect and analyze technological data in public safety operations. Koberger also posted a Reddit survey. We know all about that, understanding the emotions when committing a crime. As part of this investigation, law enforcement obtained search warrants to determine cellular devices that utilize cellular towers in close proximity to the King Road residence. This is yet another layer of evidence. We're now on page 13 of 19. November 13, 2022, between 3 and 5 a.m., after determining that Koberger was associated to both this vehicle and the 8458 phone, investigators reviewed these search warrant returns. A query of the 8458 phone in these returns did not show the 8458 phone utilizing cellular tower resources in close proximity to the King Road residence between 3 and 5 a.m. Now, I have heard, I've seen it on YouTube channels, I've seen it in the media, that they were saying that Koberger stalked and that his phone was moving in tandem. Thus far, it appears that that's not the case. And it also seems like he didn't take his phone along to this crime, which is one smart move in a sort of confederacy of dunces moves, right? Thanks a lot, Les. Thanks a lot. It says, based on my training, experience, and conversations with law enforcement officers that specialize in the utilization of cellular phone records, individuals can either leave their cellular telephone at a different location before committing a crime or turn their cell phone off prior. Yeah, obviously. This is done by subjects in an effort to avoid. Yes, we know that. Also, I also know that on numerous occasions, subjects will surveil an area where they intend to commit a crime prior to the date of the crime. Depending on the circumstances, this could be done a few days before or several months while diddy. During these types of surveillance, it is possible that an individual would not leave their cellular phone in a separate location. On December 23, I applied for and was granted a search warrant for historical phone records. Really good work. November 12 to November 14 for the I-8458 phone. I received records for that. The records indicated that 8458 is subscribed to Brian Koberger. These records indicated historical cell site location information. On November 13 at 2:42 a.m., the 8458 phone was utilizing cellular resources that provide coverage to Pullman, right, here after the Koberger residence. At 2:47 a.m., the 8458 phone utilized cellular resources still of the Koberger residence. At 2:47, the phone stops reporting to the network, which is consistent with the phone being in the area without cell coverage, or the network connection is disabled or maybe turned it off. The 8458 phone does not report to the network again until 4:48 a.m. I always say the absence of evidence is evidence. So a killer is actually in trouble either way. If he takes his phone with him, then that can show where he was. And also, if his phone doesn't go anywhere and is off, that can also be evidence during a crucial time. Why was your phone off or nothing happening between that specific period, right? So it says here, between 4:50 a.m. and 5:26 a.m., the phone utilizes cellular resources that are consistent with the 8458 phone traveling south on. So it seems like he did take his phone with him, but turned it on almost by the time he got home. Doesn't that make sense? At about 5:30 a.m., the 8458 phone is utilizing resources that provide coverage to Pullman and consistent with the phone traveling back to the Koberger residence. So it's 8 o'clock now. I'm living on borrowed time. I don't know whether the power is going to go out in 1 minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or not at all. But if I do disappear, that's what's happened. Okay, so bye-bye if I don't have time to say goodbye. But anyway, here we go. I'll just try and get more in if I can. The 8458 phone's movements are consistent with the movements of the white Elantra. That's very important to establish. That is observed traveling north on Stadium Drive at about 5:27 a.m. That's really, really important, that they can sync Koberger's phone, and it's in his name, to Koberger's vehicle, and that's in his name, and where are they both moving. That is really hard evidence to argue against. Did someone take his phone and his vehicle and put bushy eyebrows on and commit this crime? It's going to be tough to argue against that. Further review indicated that the 8458 phone utilized cellular resources on November 13 that are consistent with the 8458 phone leaving the area of the Koberger residence at about 9 a.m. and traveling to Moscow, was it that day? Specifically, the 8458 phone utilized cellular resources between 9:12 and 9:21 a.m. So it seems like he went back to the crime scene at 9 o'clock that morning. So about 5 hours later, it seems like he drove back there. The 8458 phone next utilized cellular resources consistent with the 8458 phone traveling back to the area of the Coburger residence. Do you guys agree? It looks like he went to the crime scene or close to the crime scene about 5 hours later. Below is a depiction of the possible route taken based off of cellular site locations. So you can't really see these maps that clearly. Now just look at the layers of evidence: shoe print, DNA, cell phone, CCTV, and actually even an eyewitness, right? It's quite a lot of layers there. Investigators found that the 8458 phone did connect to a cell phone tower. We're on page 16 of 19, so I've almost finished. That provides service to Moscow on November 14, 2022. So it looks like he went back into town the very next day as well. But they do not believe the 8458 phone was in Moscow on that date. So he drove near to the area. The 8458 phone was not connected to any towers that provide service to Moscow since that date. Since then, he never went back. And it obviously became really high profile. Based on my training experience and the facts of the investigation thus far, I believe that Coburger, the use of the 8458 phone, was likely the driver of the white Elantra. Is that a fair, reasonable thing to say? That is observed departing Pullman, and that this vehicle is likely suspect vehicle 1. Additionally, the route of travel of the phone during what I've just said, during the early morning hours of November 13, and the lack of the 8458 phone reporting between 247 and 448, I mean, that could be his alibi. If his phone was accessing TikTok or sending messages, then that would be his alibi. But during that critical period, his phone's dead. It's also quite interesting how early his phone comes back to life and where it comes back to life, when it comes back to life. So it is so true to say, yes, this is consistent with Coburger attempting to conceal his location during the quadruple homicide that occurred at the King Road residence. He didn't do it very well. It seems like he was seen all along the route and even inside the crime scene. And you've got to think that the survivors must have been worried about their safety, especially D, right? Now, also think about this idea of a targeted killing. The guy had been driving around and round and round. He was definitely targeting that residence. Anyway, now we're on page 17. On December 23rd, 2022, I was granted a search warrant for Coburger's historical CSLI. Not quite sure what that is, CSLI. From June 23rd to current, prospective location information and a pen registered trap and trace on the 8458 phone to aid in efforts to determine if Coburger stalked any of the victims in this case. I don't know if he'd be mentioning it if he hadn't. Conducted surveillance on the King Road residence, was in contact with any of the victims' associates. And so let's see what he says. On December 23rd, I received historical records for the 8458 phone. What do you think the answer is? Was he stalking? Did he make a couple of visits to 1122 King Road? Was he a peeping Tom? After consulting with CAST, I was able to determine estimated locations for the 8458 phone from June 22nd to the present. That's a good place to start because that's when he arrived in Washington. June 2022, the time period authorized by the court. The records for the 8458 phone show the 8458 phone utilizing cellular resources, providing coverage to 1122 King Road on 12 occasions prior to November 13, 2022. So it looks like he must have gone there 12 different times, and not as an invited party guest as far as we know, but as an uninvited party guest, as a voyeur, as a peeping Tom, as a stalker. And maybe this is the stalker that Kaylee was referring to. All of these occasions, except for one, occurred in the late evening and early morning hours of their respective days. Do you remember even his neighbor said that he was always up late at night? So what is he doing when he's up late at night? I hate the world, or I hate this, or, everybody's having their fun. I'm not. And so he goes to the most obvious beacon of fun and enjoyment. And what does he find? 1122 King Road. Doesn't that become his target? One of these occasions on August 21, 2022, the 8th, so I was right. When he went on a Sunday night, just before midnight, he actually went to the King Road residence. That was one of his stalking sorties. The 8458 phone utilized cellular resources, providing coverage to the King Road residence from 10:34 to 11:35. Now, I must say, one of my reservations with this, while the power was still on, one of my reservations with this was, if he was stalking, why didn't they notice him? If he was going there over and over and over again, why didn't they notice him? Well, there is a possible answer to that, because he was drive stalking. He was in a vehicle. He wasn't walking around. He wasn't skulking around. Maybe he did a little bit of walking and skulking, but he didn't do enough that would raise anybody's attention. So it looks like he was drive stalking. Does that make sense? Drive-by stalking. At about 11:37 p.m., that's on August 21st, that's a Sunday, Koberger was stopped by later County Sheriff's Deputy Duke. We know about that. The 8548 phone, so there he had his phone with him. So there's a boo-boo made by the perpetrator. You take your phone, you take your phone to the crime, but you turn it off. On your way back, you turn it on, but that's now still syncing your movements with the vehicle. You didn't really think it through, did you? Also, now that they've got your number, they can track other times that you went to the crime scene. Sorry, all those attempts, all those other attempts, taking off your front license plate didn't really seem to work, right? It doesn't help turning your phone off once, but all the other times you visit that crime scene, you have it on. I mean, he doesn't live there and he has no reason to be there. So further analysis of the cellular data provided showed the 8458 phone utilized cellular resources on November 13. So we know about all of that. At 12:36 p.m. So at that time, I think the kids were in the corner club, and that was quite early Sunday morning. He actually went to Kate's Cup of Joe Coffee at 810 Port Drive, Clarkson. So he had a cup of coffee there to help keep him awake till the very last hours of the morning. Surveillance, do you remember I said, did sleep deprivation play a role in this crime? What do you think the answer is? In the criminal doing silly things? Surveillance footage from the US Chef's store located at 820 Port Drive, Clarkson, and adjacent to Kate's Cup of Joe. I will be obviously mapping all of this, so we'll figure out all the movements. It showed a white Elantra consistent with suspect vehicle 1 drive past Kate's Cup of Joe at a time consistent with the cellular data. So look how they are mapping his movements, right? At about 12:46 p.m., the 8458 phone then utilized cellular data in the area of Albertson's grocery store at 400 Bridge Street in Clarkston, Washington. Do you remember I also said, I wonder whether this killer is an animal lover, given that the dog was allowed to live, and then he turns out to be a vegetarian. Right about that, but then wrong about, did he work for a butcher? Surveillance footage obtained from the Albertson showed Koberger exit the white Elantra. So while they actually got surveillance footage for that as well, consistent with suspect vehicle 1 at approximately 12:49 p.m. Now, I just want you to think about this. Can you imagine Brian Koberger himself reading this affidavit? It's not a paragraph. It's not one page. It's not 1.5 pages. It's not this iffy thing. Like, we think we may have found a shoe print, or one of the survivors recognized your eyebrow, right? It's a pretty elaborate mosaic. You agree? Can you imagine how his heart must be sinking reading this? Also, it's like, I'm a doctorate in criminology, but actually, maybe I'm a dunce in criminology. Interior surveillance camera showed Koberger walk through the store, purchase unknown items at the checkout, and leave at approximately 1:04 p.m. Koberger's possible path of travel is depicted below. Hard to make out, right? Well, now I think I can start relaxing. It's 11 minutes past. I guess it can still go out. Additional analysis of records for the 8458 phone indicated that between approximately 5:32 p.m. and 5:36, the 8458 phone used coverage from Johnson, Idaho. The 8458 phone then stops reporting to the network for approximately 5:36 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. That is consistent with the phone being in that area, and the phone traveled in the hours immediately following the suspected time the homicides occurred. Okay, now we jump to December 27th. Pennsylvania agents recovered the trash, that's what we thought, from the Koberger family residence in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania. That evidence was sent to the Idaho State Lab for testing. Do you remember in some of my videos I actually had the question, is it legal to take someone's trash? First question. Second question, is it legal to do DNA on what you find in that trash? And I think there's some states where they are not very happy with that. How happy would you be if someone took your trash and did DNA testing on it? Well, I suppose you could say, if you've done nothing wrong, what's wrong with that? Anyway, it says on December 28th, the Idaho State Lab. Now, bear in mind, Brian was actually on their radar 12 days later, so about the 25th of November. And then, on the 28th of November, they were checking DNA. So at this point, I don't think it's a question for them. In terms of the legal case, in terms of the police, I don't think the cops are thinking, did Koberger commit this crime? Can you see they are saying, how can we prove that he committed this crime? Do you remember the police chief also saying, we don't just want an arrest, we want a successful prosecution? That, I remember, being a very interesting turn of phrase. It sounded like he was very confident. It sounded like he could arrest someone at that point, and obviously he could have. But they were trying to get evidence to put together a very, very strong case, and they have. Maybe the reason why they took their time the way they did was they knew they're dealing with a PhD in criminology. Let's be extra careful with this guy. Also, it's a quadruple murder. We've got to secure a successful conviction. Does that make sense? Yeah, it is considered abandoned property. But is DNA considered abandoned property? Anyway, so it says here, look at that, 99.9998% of the male population would be expected to be excluded. So in other words, that's how certain they were of their DNA case. One thing I'm interested to know is, was that the only DNA that they got? I mean, it's a very strong thing that they found the knife sheath, the clip on the knife sheath. That's where they found Koberger's DNA. Is there anywhere else that they found his DNA? I'd really be interested to know. But of course, if he's wearing all black and he was wearing gloves, who knows? Who knows? Did he injure himself during the thing? Well, there's no mention of that here. And we're almost out of this probable cause affidavit. One does wonder, maybe he did injure himself and it's just not in the affidavit. Not everything is in here. So anyway, they recovered his DNA from trash. That evidence was sent to the lab, and it obviously looked like it's, what does it say? It would be expected at least 99% of the male population would be expected to be excluded from the possibility of being the suspect's biological father. So it seems like it does say a biological father of suspect profile. So the DNA that they ended up getting and testing, so I guess the genealogical DNA testing that they did was with his father's profile. So at the end of the day, this is the answer to the question. They found they found DNA at the crime scene on the knife sheath, which is a very connecting thing to the actual crime. It's not like it was just floating somewhere in the kitchen. They found it on the knife sheath. In other words, when he clipped the knife or unclipped the clip that secures the knife, right? And then they linked it to his father from the trash from their home. So that is how they made that connection. In other words, that proved that DNA on the knife sheath was Brian Koberger's DNA, or at least 99.9998% chance. I suppose the defense could say, yeah, but there's a 0.0002% chance that it couldn't be. What do you think a jury would say about that? Based on the above information, I'm requesting an arrest warrant be issued for Brian Koberger for burglary at 1122 King Road and 4 counts of murder in the first degree for the murders of Madison Mogan, Kaylee Gonzalez, Zana Kernodal, and Ethan Chapin. And then he signed it there. Now, doesn't it make you sad in a way that it was so easy to, it looks like it was so easy to catch the killer? The killer thought he was so clever, and yet it looks like it was actually so easy to catch him. Doesn't it also look like he didn't really know the victims? Doesn't it look like he didn't attend parties at 1122 King Road? We don't know that for a fact, but it appears that way. It does appear that there's an incel aspect here, that he simply didn't have any social life and was looking at what was going on from the outside in and perhaps judging them, perhaps saying, you guys are, you shouldn't be having so much fun. I'm not having so much fun, so you shouldn't be. And again, one must ask, how did he find the house? Was it by going to the Mad Greek restaurant? Was it by word of mouth? Did people say, dude, you're not going to believe this, there are hot blondes that stay in this house, whatever. Were there kids from his class that said, oh, what did you do this weekend? We went to this mad party. How did he find out about it? Yeah, they took the dad's. Yeah, so as Terry says, now on to the defense. If you were the defense, what do you think you could argue here? I think your best case would be to say trial by media, that the jury, even if the jury find him guilty, they're going to judge him harshly, right? Do you agree with that? So, I mean, there's not really too much that you can argue, except I suppose you could try and attack the DNA collection of the knife sheath. Was that done properly? Was that photographed? Was that documented? Was there any contamination? Did anyone go into that room before the time? There's not much mention of that. I don't know if you noticed that. That could definitely be something that the defense focus on. Is, I wonder if the power's not going to go out. It's now 8:20. I mean, I think if it doesn't go out in the next 10 minutes, it's not going to go out. So let's hope for the best. So far, so good. I'm really glad that I was able to finish this 19 pages in an hour and 15 minutes. Without just reading it, providing a little bit of quick analysis at the same time. I do want to do a follow-up video, much shorter, maybe a 5 or 10 minute video, where I just highlight the biggest takeouts from the affidavit. But I think one of the biggest is this knife sheath. Do you guys agree with it? with that. The knife sheath that has DNA on the sort of clip, and I think it's like a metal clip. And so what you imagine happened was the perpetrator inserted the knife into the sheath with his bare hand, clipped it, and then put on a glove, and then, sorry, it's too late, you've already left your DNA behind. And in the struggle with either Madison or Kaylee, possibly Kaylee actually pulled that knife sheath off his belt or whatever, it broke off. So there probably was a struggle with one of the victims on the top floor and at least one of the victims on the second floor. Does that make sense? Okay, I will do a summary for you. I want to go back to the exact words about that DNA. See if we can find it. There's a redacted page. I'm just trying to find where it says that thing. There it is. It's only on page 3. It's quite incredible. Just go through that again. Let's put it up full screen. So as I entered this bedroom, so that's the bedroom, I think, on the east side, and it's Madison's bedroom on the top floor. I could see 2 females in the single bed in the room. Both Gonsalves and Mogan were deceased with visible stab wounds. I also later noticed what appeared to be a tan leather knife sheath laying on the bed next to Mogan's right side when viewed from the door. So maybe Madison pulled it off. Now, I would imagine from this that the primary victim was probably Kaylee. I still think that the original victims were attacked on the top floor, and the killer made his way down, and that was when he encountered D. Does that make sense to you? He didn't first attack Xana and Ethan and then go to the top floor. But we do need to study the affidavit in more detail to make sense of the sounds that she heard. We do need to do that. Remember, the first sound that she thought she heard was a dog barking, or that's upstairs. She didn't hear a sound next to her. So anyway, what I'm trying to say is it looks like Kaylee was attacked first. Kaylee was, I think, bigger than Madison as well. And remember, someone said, is there someone outside? And it sounded like Kaylee's voice. Anyway, it looks like maybe if Kaylee woke up first, the killer would have attacked her, which would have then woken Madison up, and she then managed to pull off the sheath in a struggle with the killer. Do you agree that the fact that the sheath is on the bed next to Madison probably means she pulled it off, which means she was probably awake longer than and attacked second to Kaylee? Does that make sense? Okay, I'm going to deal with your comments in a moment. The sheet was later processed and had K-Bar, USMC, and the United States Marine Corps Eagle Globe and anchor insignia stamped on the outside of it. The Idaho State Lab later located a single source of male DNA left on the button snap of the knife sheath, which I presume is a silver kind of thing. Let's see if we can bring up a picture of that. Just give me a moment. Hopefully the power stays on. I think it will. K-Bar USMC sheath. Let's see. I think this is what we're talking about. So I think that's what we're talking about, that thing right there. Can you guys see that? Shall I try and blow it up even more. So it's that what do you call it? That smooth surface probably is where the critical DNA was left behind. And that's probably the best clue in this entire case. Do you guys agree? This is probably by far the best clue in the entire case. It puts the DNA not only on the sheath belonging to the murder weapon, but the DNA belongs to Brian Koberger. So there it is. See if I can find another version of that. I've got some small. So yeah, here's another one, and another one. These images are just so small, but it's basically that little thing there. It's holding the handle of the knife in place. I don't know why these images are so small. There's another one. It's that little thing there holding the handle of the knife in place. That holds the blade in place. That holds the handle. Let's just see if I can find a better image. There's another version of it. It's that thing over there. So what are some of the things that we've learned here? We've learned that there was CCTV right next to Madison's room, 40 feet away. And Brian Enton actually mentioned that. He said, you know what, there's Ring doorbell cameras right around me over here. So when the perpetrator was driving around, fixated on whatever he was fixated on, was he not noticing the cameras? Apparently he wasn't. Or maybe he thought, if I just drive without a license plate and my phone off, that'll be enough. Not quite. Also, what is staggering here was what Dee said about everything. That we literally had a eyewitness. It does again make you wonder, why did it take so long to call the authorities? If she saw someone at 4 o'clock in the morning, why did it take until 11:58 to call the authorities? And why the thing about it, there's someone unconscious? Do you know what I mean? That's also, you could imagine, could be part of the defense case. Can we believe what Dee said because she took so long to call the authorities? Can we believe that Dee has identified the killer? Couldn't there be somebody else, right? And do you see now how there is a worrying thing of, when there were noise complaints, they didn't really deal with the cops. Well, yeah, they actually had a quadruple murder in their house, and they even saw the perpetrator, right? She doesn't say anything about she saw a knife in his hand, or that the knife was covered in blood, or anything like that. She doesn't say anything about that. But how on earth do you go from that to calling the cops? Is it almost 7 hours later, and saying, well, I think there's someone unconscious in the room. So that's definitely something that the defense can use, I think. Maria says, thanks for this update. Sperminsky says, I just want to see the crime scene photos. Candace says, is everything you are reporting from a reliable source? What a question. This is from the probable cause affidavit. I put all my sources in the descriptions to my videos. What a question. Wow. You're obviously new to the channel. Yeah, it is ridiculous. It definitely is ridiculous. But like I said, the habit of cops come there for a complaint and they just sort of dismiss it. This ended up happening with this as well, and that is going to be a problem for the prosecution. Because how do you explain it? Like, did she just go back to sleep? What's the explanation? Did something need to be hidden away? Was it this big deal? What, we cannot call the police because X, Y, Z. What's that all about? And I mean, I suppose the defense could come up with an alternative thing that someone had a boyfriend come over as a kind of defense case. Someone had a boyfriend come over besides Ethan, and someone else didn't like it, and ... whatever. Anyway. Okay, so Amanda says, can you go back to the part of the affidavit about what Dee saw? Okay, so let's do that right now. So that's here. That's what's so, I must say, so frustrating with these power failures. You sometimes you prepare for them and nothing happens, but more often you don't prepare for them and then something does happen. But the fact that it's 33 minutes past 8, probably not going to go off. Okay, so this is what Dee saw, right? As part of the investigation, numerous interviews were conducted. 2 of the interviews included B and D, those are the surviving roommates, and they were inside the King Road residence at the time of the homicides, and they were roommates to the victims. Now, the reason I'm not giving their names, and I want to encourage you not to do that, is it's still quite a sensitive time, and we don't want them harassed by other YouTubers or by the media. They have an appointment in court. The most important thing they can do is testify. They don't really need to be harassed or harangued. And so we should just try and stick to the convention they've used in this affidavit, refer to them as B and D, which is what I've been doing all along, right? We know who they are, we know what their names are, but let's try and respect their privacy and allow this investigation to do what it needs to do, right? We can still continue figuring out the case, but we don't have to focus too much on their names and all of that stuff. Let's have that be dealt with in court, okay? So anyway, it says BF's bedroom was located on the east side of the first floor of the King residence. So what that really means is if you look at this image, then B's room is here. B's bedroom is over here. And no one occupies that bedroom where the red light is, ironically. This room is vacant. That's where we saw the golf clubs. This is the room where Ethan and Xana died, and Xana was on the floor, and we also saw blood coming out the wall on the other side, likely Xana's blood, right? So that's there. And then Dylan, sorry, I didn't mean to say her name, D slept in this room. And that's a little bit of a thing we didn't know. We actually assumed that both of these bottom rooms were occupied. It was only this one and this one. And this one was empty. This is where Kaylee would have slept, and this is where the dog was found, in this room. I think there's a bathroom over here, and this is the room where Madison slept. It was her bedroom, and this is where both victims were found. And the knife sheath was found with the DNA on it belonging to Koberger, well, allegedly belonging to him, well, 99.9998% allegedly, was found next to Madison in this room, on this bed, which suggests that Madison pulled it off. I mean, I suppose you could even ask the question, did she pull it off seeing him pull the knife out of it? Like, before anything happened, was she already trying to defend herself? It is interesting that I think Dylan, sorry to say it again, so D heard Kaylee say, someone's in here, or someone's in the house, something like that. And it seems like they knew it's someone who's not supposed to be in the house. Anyway, let's continue. On the evening of November 12th, Chapin and Knodel are seen by B over there, so we know about that. B also said Chapin did not live in the King Road residence, but was a guest, right? That and Gonsalves and Mogan were at a local bar, the Corner Club at 202 Main Road, and they've seen video footage, and we'll go through that. And then they were dropped off at 1:56 a.m. And then here we go. D and B both made statements that indicated the occupants were home by 2 a.m., meaning everyone was home by 2 a.m., which means that they must have been awake to know that at 2 a.m., right? They were, and I mean, that already is a big clue that they probably knew about something else. If they were awake at 2 a.m. or even in bed and they heard them come in, why wouldn't they hear other things? The fact that D stayed on the same floor as two of the other victims and immediately below the other victim's floor, that also tells you something. Now, what I find really interesting is all of us have assumed that the new roommates both lived on the bottom floor. Didn't the killer assume that as well? Did the killer know that there was a roommate, a new roommate on the second floor? Probably didn't expect there to be 3 people on the first floor. On the middle floor. Anyway, it says, with the exception of Knodel, who received a DoorDash order at about 4 a.m. So Xana was still awake at about 4 a.m. Does anyone know what DoorDash is? Is it a food order? So that is amazing that didn't prevent the crime from taking place. Did the killer see the DoorDash order being delivered? Okay, let's have a look at some of your comments. Food delivery, okay. It says here, D said she originally went to sleep in her bedroom on the southeast side of the second floor. She woke up at 4 a.m. There it is. It sounded like Kaylee was playing with her dog in one of the upstairs bedrooms. So actually what I think that means is she heard the dog. And I think the dog was barking. We know the camera picked it up. And Kaylee was making noises. She says she heard who she thought was Kaylee say something like, there's someone here. And I think Kaylee would only say that if she saw that person. I don't think it was just hearing someone. But the other side is, why is someone on the top floor when there's no reason for them to be there at 4 o'clock in the morning? Do you see what I'm saying? There would be no reason for anyone, even a housemate, to be on the top floor at 4 o'clock in the morning. And I think someone who's really tall would immediately send the alarm bells ringing. It wouldn't be a matter that you see a shadow and you think, oh, it's just one of the other kids. This is a tall person. A review of records obtained from a forensic download of Knodel's phone showed this could also have been Knodel that said, there's someone here. as her cell phone indicated, she was likely awake and using TikTok at 4:12. So literally, think about the timing of this, and not very good surveillance. The crime happened at 4:17. 5 minutes before that, Xana was on her phone, awake, using TikTok. And 10 minutes before that, there was a DoorDash delivery. It's quite a running the gauntlet type crime to dodge all of that sort of thing in order to execute your crime successfully. Dee says she looked out of her bedroom, so that's on that first floor, on the second floor, on the floor where the kitchen is. So she went out the bedroom somewhere here and probably just looked out here. Can I see anything? There's a stairway going up here, right? And she didn't see anything. And that's when she heard the comment about someone being in the house. Now, it's quite tragic in a way that Dee didn't just say, Kaylee, are you okay? Or Kaylee, it's me, right? Dee said she opened her door a second time when she heard what she thought was crying coming from Xana's room. Now, we don't know what length of time passed between those two. We don't know if it was a minute later or 5 minutes later. But I think that probably is accurate, that it was crying coming from Xana's room. And then she said she heard a male voice say, it's okay, I'm going to help you. Again, you've kind of got to ask yourself, why not say, hey, guys, are you okay? Right? Why not say something? And I guess that also goes to, was Dee also to some extent inebriated, or what is going on with her? What's going on with her that she hears things but doesn't really do anything? At 4:17 a.m., a security camera at 1112 King Road, a residence immediately to the northwest of 1122 King Road, picked up distorted audio of what sounded like voices or a whimper, followed by a loud thud. What do you think that loud thud is? Someone falling off the bed? A door closing? I think it's more than likely someone landing on the floor, right? Inside the house. Suppose it could be the sliding door closing, but who knows? A dog can be heard barking numerous times starting at 4:17 a.m. Now, it's also very hard to imagine the dog is barking at 4:17 a.m. Did no neighbors hear that? Apparently they didn't. Did B not hear the dog barking? And did D had heard everything? Why is D not calling the police at this point? The dog's barking. Well, now have a look. Aren't you going to shut the dog up? And so yeah, it is. Oh, so the security camera is less than 50 feet from the west wall of Canodal's bedroom. Let's have a look for 1122 King Road. I think we know where it is, but let's just make sure. Okay, so that's where the house is. There's Taylor Avenue. 1112 King Road. And it's actually not quite where I thought it would be. I thought it would be here. That's pretty incredible. I mean, is that right? So 1112 King Road actually heard a thud all the way across. Can that be right? That can't, is that 50 feet? 20 meters. I suppose that could be 50 feet. That makes it look a lot closer, doesn't it? Let's go to, so there's a camera here. Now bear in mind at 4 o'clock in the morning, it's dead quiet. And because the air is so cold, right? When air is cold, sound transmits much better than when air is warm. So not only is the air cold, it's quiet because it's 4 o'clock in the morning. And so this camera actually picks up the sounds of a thud. Could that thud be the sliding door closing? I guess it could be. Could the sounds be the dog? Probably. I mean, the dog would be barking loud enough, I think, for the camera to pick it up. But that certainly gives you a very sad, visceral idea of the reality of what is going on. A camera is hearing things, and all these other sleepers can't hear anything. Let's go to the street view and just have a look. So it's now been blurred out, but it's basically this house. Now, I remember seeing this bicycle a few times and thinking, could the killer have used a bicycle? And then I couldn't find the bicycle again, but anyway, there it is. So there's apparently a camera here that picked something up. Unless it's here. One 1122. Is it that house or that house? No, it's diagonally opposite. So there's the house. There's the entry to it. Can you see there's that water tower? Can you see any camera? Maybe it wasn't installed yet. There's some shoes hanging from on the greenhouse. Okay, let's have a look at the greenhouse. Maybe it was a camera that's here on this side that picked up the audio. What's up there? Is that a camera? Doesn't look like it. Maybe they subsequently installed a camera. Unless that's something, I'm not sure what that is over there. Hard to make out with all these Christmas lights. Is that a camera? That could be a camera there. Is that a Ring doorbell camera? Doesn't look like it. Yeah, no, that is true. And I normally don't like all caps or exclamation marks, but that is actually justified, I'd say. Anyway, so there's a camera from here that picked up audio, and I think also must have picked up the lights moving by. Wonder what that is. I don't think it's a camera. Is there a camera on the rear of that building? Don't see it. Anyway, 111 King Road. Let's go back to this. How do I? Yeah, it is the house right on the end, right on the edge there. It is the greenhouse. Well, that's quite surprising. You would have thought it would, if it had to be a house, it would be these or this one, or something of these apartments, or one of these houses here. And apparently, Brian Hinton said there was Ring doorbell cameras on there. But apparently, there's a camera on this house. We aren't able to see it, but apparently it was there. And maybe the killer didn't know about it either, right? So it picked up a distorted audio of what sounded like voices or a whimper followed by a loud thud. So it could be the sound almost, so a dog can also be heard barking. So that voices is, I think, different to a dog barking. Voices or a whimper and then a loud thud. I wonder if that is not the sound of what happened in Ethan and Xana's room, because the thud against the wall, isn't that where Xana died? It's so sad to think about. A dog can be heard barking numerous times. That dog is trying to tell people, please come and help me. My owner is in distress. The dog can smell things. The dog can hear things better than anyone else. Unfortunately, even the people inside the house aren't really responding in the right way. Dee said she opened her door for the third time after she heard the crying and saw a figure clad in black clothing and a mask that covered the person's mouth and nose walking towards her. So obviously it didn't cover his eyes. It covered probably like that. So he's dressed in black. He's obviously trying to stay invisible. Thinks he's a master assassin. He walked towards her. Not very muscular, male, tall, athletically built with bushy eyebrows. The male walked past Dee and she stood in a frozen shock phase. I'm not trying to be funny, but do you believe that she wouldn't scream for help? I mean, someone has just said someone's in the house. She's just heard someone crying and saying something like, it's okay, I'll help you. And Ethan is right in the room next door. Would she not scream for help? Would you scream for help? And I suppose you could say she was paralyzed, but then do you stay paralyzed for 7 hours? I'm not trying to be funny and I'm not trying to accuse anyone. I'm just saying, does this make sense? So literally, she's somewhere here. Bear in mind the kitchen is on the outside there, so she may be somewhere here, and the male walks towards her and then out through the kitchen door. That's the way I understand it. Unless he walked anyway, they found a shoe print of his right outside her door. So I don't know whether the killer went to her door, then went into the bathroom, and then went into that room. Who knows? It's a little bit unclear. So that is something we need to ascertain, and the prosecution are going to have a bit of a tough job here, is tracing the exact route that the killer took, given the evidence. Can you see why it's quite confusing in a couple of ways? It's confusing that how did the killer walk towards her when the exit was just around the corner? And how and why did the killer leave a shoe print right outside her door? Where was she when that happened? The male walked past Dee as she stood in a frozen shock phase. He walked past. Doesn't really mean walked past her, just walked by. Walked towards the black sliding glass door. So at one point he was walking towards her, probably from Xana's room, and that's right after she hears, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." It also must make you wonder, did the killer must have heard the guy saying as well, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." Or is it the killer that said that? I don't really think so. Anyway, so the male walked past Dee as she stood in a frozen shock phase. Then he walked towards the black sliding glass door. DM locked herself in her room after seeing the male. Why did she lock herself in the room? Well, surely she must have seen some blood on him. There must have been blood on the knife. There must have been blood somewhere. I mean, she just saw someone walking. I suppose the way he's dressed is pretty scary as well. If she saw him walk towards the black sliding glass door, did she never secure that door? Did she never go and lock that sliding glass door? Anyway, she locked herself in the room. Dee said she didn't recognize the male. This leads to investigators to believe that the murderer left the scene. And then that's really the end of it. Thanks very much, Lahil. Can you see how we have a bit of difficulty with this. It gives us a story, but it's a little bit unclear. And it's also a little bit unreasonable. Wouldn't you wait for a while and then maybe try and send a message to someone's phone? And wouldn't you at some point go and check? Wouldn't you also look out your bedroom window and you see a car driving off while he's left, and then, you know, how can you not do something for 7 hours? Or did she lie in her room, terrified, shocked with fear, and then just fell asleep? During the processing of the crime scene, investigators found a latent shoe print. This was located during the second processing of the crime scene by using a presumptive test, and it was found just outside DM's bedroom. So D can be very glad that she's alive. Do you agree with that? She can feel very lucky that she's alive. Not only was the killer standing outside her bedroom door, he was also walking towards her, and then he just elected to leave. He could just as easily have not left. But what I don't quite understand is where she says, "This is consistent with DM's statement regarding the suspect's path of travel." So I don't know whether if the Vans type shoes sold just outside Dee's bedroom. No one wonders whether they found these shoes in Koberger's apartment in Washington State University or at his father's residence, you know, in like a suitcase. Not that that would be absolutely necessary, but I don't know whether just outside the door may mean near the door? Is it like literally in front of the door? Because how would that make sense? In other words, could the shoe print be sort of here, and is the door over here? Does that make sense? So here's the room. Is there a door here? But there's also a route to the kitchen and the sliding door. Isn't that there as well? I suppose that could be a way that could be the case. So one does actually need to go through the affidavit and do a mapping exercise where they talk about certain things, and they provided maps, but you can't really make much sense of them. And then also do a mapping of the inside of the house exercise, trying to see where the doors and exits are and how the killer actually moved. So I think we will figure it out in the end. What else? Investigators believe the homicides occurred between 4 and 4:25 a.m. Probably closer to 4:17. Again, the fact that law enforcement were only called at 11:58 is just wacko. Why? That definitely is quite wacko. Okay, so I think that is it. I'm really pleased that I was able to do this reading of the affidavit. As you guys know, I've been postponing this video so many times because it actually looked like we would get the affidavit the same day that you see the picture behind me, because all you had to do was catch a flight. I suppose that was unreasonable because he still had to appear in court, but nevertheless. Anyway, yeah, we are. Do you agree it's both very saddening? You get a sense of what really happened to all four of them. You get a sense of each one of the victims, what likely happened to them. But you also get a sense that this someone called this criminal a moron. I don't know if I agree with that, but he certainly isn't a criminal mastermind. He likes to think of himself as that, and that gives you an idea of who he is. And it turns out, looks like that he studied criminology. The whole thing, dressing up like an assassin and then making a series of stupid mistakes. Some not bad things, like he turns his phone off, takes off the front license plate, but then other really dumb things like, well, he allows himself to be seen. He executes the crime. You know, he'd only stalked 12 times. And on the night that he commits the crime, he barely misses a DoorDash guy and someone else who's awake in the house on TikTok. So you kind of get the idea he was quite desperate to get the crime over and done with, don't you? That is definitely a question. That is definitely a question. Please try and use just the word D instead of the full name. Just following the convention of the affidavit, right? B and D. Okay, let's deal over the next 2-3 minutes with some of your questions. Stephanie, have you just joined us, Stephanie? You say you're 2 hours behind. Are you just talking about Tiddlywinks? Good to have you here. Yeah, he does believe he's a master criminal. Absolutely. She will probably be like the star witness. And that's also why it's important not to traumatize her, or, she needs to be allowed to do her thing. you can see a shitstorm brewing though, because it's very hard not to think. So what was going on for 7 hours? Very hard not to think that. And she'll likely be asked that in court. Who knows what her explanation is? It is definitely disturbing. It kind of makes you wonder how strong a relationship did the survivors have with the other roommates? Were they friends? Were they genuine friends, or were they just sharing space? It just makes you wonder. It also makes you wonder. Thanks a lot, Jean. Thanks a lot. Thank you. It also makes you wonder, did B, because you don't hear anything about B, did D not send a text to B at any point? Did B not hear dog barking if a camera across the road, diagonally across the road, could hear that? Is B generally a very, I don't want to turn them into the suspects here, but you can't help thinking that. And even if they weren't very good housemates, doesn't make them any more than lazy, I guess, and maybe a bit reckless. That's a really good point from Pauline Buckles. Do you think law enforcement will release the 911 call? I think they will, but they may feel they don't want to jeopardize their star witness. So if the 911 call reflects poorly on D, and people start to agitate and becomes kind of a, let's do a witch hunt on D. She was a traitor to her housemates or something. I'm just saying, if it becomes this extremely horrible social media shitstorm, she may decide, no, I don't want to testify. I want to do a Nicole Kessinger. I want to just disappear. So maybe they won't release it to protect the integrity of the investigation. You can see why there would be quite a few reasons law enforcement would not want some of this information to come out, because some of it is a bit problematic. That's what I thought. Laurel says, thanks, Laurel. Kaylee was moving to Texas. He may have gotten reckless because he knew she would no longer be in the house. Maybe, but he didn't know them that well. And he also knew when he arrived there that there were 4 vehicles parked outside, at least 4. So I think he assumed that it was a full house, didn't he? So I think they may, as you say, they may need to hold on to the 911 call. I think you've got to acknowledge the 911 call is quite unconventional. You would imagine the person who should have called 911 would be D, because she saw something, she heard something at a very early time, and she was awake. Why didn't she? Well, only she can answer that question. Thanks a lot, Kathy. Thank you. I'm really glad the light stayed on. Sometimes you get lucky. She was afraid to make any noise, but yet she knew that the killer left through the kitchen door. And if she just looked through a window, she would have seen him drive off. So theoretically, didn't she know that he'd left the house, that he wasn't in the house anymore? And the only sound now in the house for a long period after that would just be the dog barking. Could you just go back to sleep with the dog barking? We've heard this before. Did he do all of this in the dark? There was light in a lot of the rooms. In Kaylee's room, Madison's room, I'm not sure if they went to sleep, if they turned that good vibes thing off. I presume that they did. But there were quite a few rooms that had like Christmas lights in them that seemed to be permanently on, including in the kitchen. And yeah, that is a very good question. What did the killer use as a light source? It's a good question. It is unconventional. That's a good point. That's a very good point. If the killer was expecting to kill four, well, Kaylee wasn't really supposed to be there, and Ethan wasn't really supposed to be there. And so when the killer had already killed four people, it's like, well, there are still people in this house. And he may have only seen four vehicles. I'm not 100% sure if he would have seen four vehicles or more, but he may have assumed that someone parking, maybe it's another area where he just wasn't really paying attention. The only thing I can really think of in terms of why would you not call the police, could it be a thing is of you've just moved into this, what I call the fun house. And if you call the police, it may mean you may have to leave that house. You may not be able to stay there anymore. And you really, really want to stay there. And I don't know, could that have been part of the internal thing going on? She had no reason to think that anybody was killed. Well, I don't want to like accuse her, but you do see the perpetrator immediately after he's committed a crime, right? There's also a bloody footprint right outside your bedroom door. Don't you notice that? He was wearing a mask. Yeah. Thanks, Susie Q. Appreciate that. So it does sound like what does he say? Oh, it's okay, I'm going to help you. It does sound like Ethan may have fought off the killer and then didn't realize how badly he was injured himself. So it's possible that Ethan actually sort of fought off the killer, and the killer kind of didn't expect to be dealing with a male, and that's why he cut his whole thing short, right? But it's okay, I'm going to help you. Sounds like Ethan was possibly quite okay, or he thought he was okay, and thought he was going to be able to help Xana, and then very shortly after that realized he's not okay. He may have been in shock when he said that. Such a tragic, when you actually hear these words verbatim, it gives you a real sense, like last words always give you a real sense in true crime of the reality. Those last words say so much. It's okay, I'm going to help you. There's someone here. I mean, someone saying that normally doesn't really mean anything. There's someone here. In this case, it was the biggest moment in their lives, the worst moment in their lives, because there was someone here. The someone behind the question is, was it the someone behind me? You can imagine those eyes furtively looking in the dark as he was going from floor to floor. it's okay, I'm going to help you. It wasn't okay, and he wasn't able to help. Anyway, sure. Yvonne says, I don't think that was ever said. That's also an interesting interpretation. Does that sound realistic? I must say there is a point to that, where you say, would someone who's just been stabbed say it's okay? I've just watched the movie Tombstone, and there are quite a few scenes where someone close to somebody else is literally dying. So it's about Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday, and sometimes you can say something like, "It's okay, it's okay." Um, you've got to just know the tone of it. But I get what Yvonne's saying. It's almost like she's saying that someone's saying it's okay, you don't need to do anything about it, or someone else is going to be helping you, so I don't. Um, that it's one of those really ambiguous things that you can read it as that's exactly what happened, and that totally makes sense, or it's totally made up, and that's the reason why I didn't call anyone for 7 hours. It's like, it's okay, I'm going to help you, so you don't need to do anything. And then is that going to be a reason? I thought that he helped her, so I went to sleep. Zircon says it sounds authentic to me. I would say I'm now caught in the middle. I really don't know. It's a good point from Yvonne. The only thing that I don't like about that is Xana is found against a wall on the floor. Surely if Ethan was going to help her, he would have gotten her onto the bed. But it's also possible that he thought he was okay, and shortly after that wasn't, I suppose. But then would you be able to say such a long sentence? It's okay, I'm going to help you. I mean, if you're the killer, and I mean, almost based on this, D hears this while the killer's in the house. Well, doesn't the killer hear that, and then wouldn't he have just gone back and killed that person? So I don't know. Um, from the one perspective, the perspective of the law enforcement and prosecuting this case, this is a great affidavit. The narrative is quite strong. They've found great evidence with the knife sheath, and one wonders, is there any other DNA besides that? Because if they didn't have that, then what? But it just seems like it's a very well put together probable cause affidavit. The thing that doesn't sit so well with us in a way is the surviving roommates. On the one hand, you spotted the killer. On the other hand, well, shouldn't you have ... right? So Stephanie says maybe exhaustion at that point, but it could also be maybe at that point the dog's barking. Maybe that was right after there was a big thud. Maybe the killer didn't anticipate having to fight a guy. And, like this idea that he thought there were um, 4 girls in the house or whatever it was, and that now he encounters a guy, and by then it had enough. The other question that comes up is, if he hadn't used the bathroom, then did he literally run out the house covered in blood? Also, if he did somebody try and clean up the blood before the police came? The other thing I think you've got to just ask is, why is he walking? Why is he walking? I mean, if you've committed a crime like that, are you going to walk through the house? Are you going to walk? I don't know. Thanks, Amy. Diana says if Dee didn't have a phone in her room, I can accept that. That's an interesting point. I suppose that's possible. Suppose that's possible. Do you think it's likely? The flip side is if she did have a phone, why did she not call for help? So I hate to say this, but don't you think the defense's best case is to blame or to cast doubt on D? In other words, to say D's behavior is suspicious. D may not be completely honest. D is trying to implicate someone else. And so is Koberger the real? I'm just saying that the defense could come up with this. I'm not saying I believe this. I'm saying the defense could say, could try to pin it on D and say that D was trying to pin it on Brian Koberger. And all the defense have got to do is raise reasonable doubt. The part that I don't think works is this isn't the kind of crime that a female commits. Females don't tend to knife people to death, let alone knife males to death. So that's going to definitely be a hard one to sell. But the bottom line is, can they create a little bit of doubt? And I think they can. Also, B, what's B's story? When did B wake up? What did B do when she woke up? The other side is if you go to bed at 4 o'clock in the morning, you are likely to sleep until 11 or 11:30. Just think about it like that. People tend to sleep about 7 hours. So if you went to bed about 4:30, right, you would be waking up at about 11:30. Yeah, I agree with that. That's a good point. A little bit of doubt's not necessarily reasonable doubt, but that's what the defense will try and do, is create tiny little cracks and create a little bit of doubt here, a little bit of doubt there. And then eventually, well, is it reasonable doubt? And you would say no, but a clever defense attorney can make it seem quite reasonable. For example, if there's police protocols that were violated with DNA collection, that she could make the case that this is a very inexperienced police force. She could make the case that the crime scene was contaminated, and for a long time it was contaminated. She could also make the case that, can you prove that the time of death was 4:17? Can you prove that? You can say that it looks like that from lights and noises, but can you actually prove it? Okay, Timmy, come. So can I ask you guys a question? And it's been coming up. Thanks, Timmy, you're ruining the sharpness of this image. Can I ask you guys a question? I think I'm going to put this up as a poll. Do you guys think that this is the work of a serial killer? I'm putting this in a poll. So let's see what you say. Make sure you vote in that poll. Let's see what you guys say. Do you think this is the work of a serial killer? So far, 73% say no. That's 90 votes, still 70% saying no. Over 100 votes now, still 70% saying no. 69% with 120 votes. So, do you remember my argument? Like from the beginning, I said, I don't think this is a serial killer. Part of the issue was that there are two survivors, but also you're going into a house, a creaky house with 6 people in it with a knife. And then it turned out that they caught this guy after 49 days. A lot of serial killers take decades to catch. And what happens, for example, with Dharma, is they commit crimes more and more and more, and then they eventually just can't stop themselves. Dharma was eventually killing someone like every second day. I think the very last crime he committed, there was already someone's body was still in his bedroom when he committed the next crime, right? So it starts slow and then it sort of picks up. If the guy who committed this crime wanted to become a master serial killer, he should have started with one victim. And that actually makes you think he's more of an incel person. And has there been any talk anywhere of a girlfriend? Doesn't there seem to be in the same thing where he's a vegan? Doesn't there seem to be the same thing of is expressing judgment on his fellow man? You get the same thing in the classroom where he treats his students as inferior, where he says, well, I'm going to give you a stricter grade based on the fact that I'm going to treat you like PhD students. And then half the class protest. Thanks a lot, Kathy. So can you see how he's got a definite gripe against society? Where does that come from? Now, I want to say something that a lot of you people don't. Okay, so Stephanie says, I will do a breakdown of the number 1, 2, 3 things we've learned from the probable cause affidavit. Well, number 1 thing we learned was the knife sheath, that the DNA was on there. Number 2 thing we learned was that the genealogical DNA testing they did with his father from the trash they got from the family home, right? I actually thought, was there some kind of aunt who gave their DNA to some DNA database? That's not actually what they did. That's what I think people thought they did, but that's not actually what they did. So they got the DNA from the trash. We know, not that this is the third most important, but we know that he stalked the area 12 times. And I think he had his phone with him, which gave that away. That's something that leaked out in the media. What else is there? The camera at 1112 King Road actually picked up 50 feet from Madison's room, picked up the sound of a dog barking, whimpering noises, and a thud. That's kind of quite news that these cameras also pick up noise, right? What else is there? The CCTV basically tracked the vehicle from his home all the way to the crime scene and kind of all the way back. I'm not saying like one continuous video, but lots and lots of bingos. Pretty interesting. Welcome, Laurel House. Welcome. Thanks for becoming a new member. Have I touched on all the important things? The cell phone. So I think this is about the fifth and pretty significant thing as well, is that they could sync the cell phone. What number was it? 8454 or something. Where are you? 8454. 8458. There it is. So they could actually sync the movements of the cell phone, which they picked up. They picked up the cell phone number during a police stop. I think he wasn't wearing his seatbelt. And is that when they got it? I think. And then that was August 21st. And then they could link that ticket that they gave him to not only the vehicle that he was driving, white Elantra, but also to the cell phone. Then they ran that cell phone through AT&T, and they were able to sync the movements of that cell phone, the pings, to the movement of the vehicle, which is exactly what happened in the Patrick Frazee case. They were able to sync the movements of Patrick Frazee's phone, Kelsey Berra's phone, who had died, and what's her name? Crystal, what's her surname? Crystal, her surname starts with a K as well. Anyway, his mistress's phone, they were able to sync the movements of the car with a phone, with the phones, and have them sort of move in the same time. Crystal Kenny, that's right. Thanks, Bria. And so in those five respects, they were able to put up a very, very good case. So I think in terms of prosecuting this case, law enforcement have done a great job. We don't know whether they've botched the DNA anywhere. We don't know why those two CSIs went back on the 20th, what that was all about. I do think the thorn in the side of this investigation is the 911 call and the circumstances around that. So in a way, their best witness, the person who actually saw the perpetrator, that's great, but why did it take you 7 hours to call the cops? That's not such a great case. Thanks, Leslie A. Hill. Thanks a lot. Stephanie says, I said yes to the serial killer poll only because it's really hard to know if he could have become a serial killer. Yeah, but you can't say he's a serial killer because he's going to become one. Is he a serial killer? Not is he becoming one? Right now, is he a serial killer? Has he killed other people? That's how you answer that question. I agree with you that he probably was heading in that direction if he wasn't caught in this crime. That's not what we're asking, is had he committed crimes before? That's really what we're talking about. So let's have a look at the poll, and then I'm going to sign off. So 72% are saying you don't think it's the work of a serial killer. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, a couple of weeks ago it was the opposite. I think I did a poll and it was the opposite. 70% said yes, I think it is a serial killer. 30% said no. And I think a lot of that was from media blowhards, people in the FBI, people in creators on YouTube who want to make a big song and dance about this case. It's bad enough as it is, but no, let's make him into a serial killer as well. The answer to the question is actually we don't know, and it might actually turn out that the security around Koberger was so, I think, extreme. Actually, flying him in that turboprop private plane the way that they did. Maybe they just couldn't get a ticket. Maybe yeah, maybe they just couldn't get a ticket on the 5th of January, given the way that the airlines have been and the weather and everything. Maybe they couldn't get a ticket at short notice. But it wasn't just that. They also had an FBI agent accompanying him instead of a US Marshal. Maybe it's not because they think he's a serial killer, just because he's a clever person on paper. He's a doctorate. He's got a doctorate in criminology. It's quite an interesting question. That does he actually have his doctorate? I think this crime, in a way, means that if he does have his doctorate, someone should take it away from him. 8458, that's right. Greg says, I wasn't saying the press release was prosecutorial. I'm just saying that the DNA matches 600,000 other men as well. Not sure what that's about. The DNA matches his father 99.998%. So Paul says, I actually think he's done it before many times. And then, but here he left behind he literally left behind the second most important item of evidence, which is the sheath of the knife. The most important would have been the knife. Suppose you could argue the absolute most important piece of evidence would be if he just stayed at the crime scene himself. But let's not be absurd about it. He left behind the knife sheath, and he was actually spotted by a victim. And yeah, it goes on. I mean, when he stalked the place, he was actually had his phone with him as well. So I don't know whether he was injured. I mean, that's not in the affidavit, so I guess we'll find that out in the course of this investigation. Anna says, I said no twice. Okay, guys, thanks so much for joining me. Wow, this for me it was a sufferfest waiting for this thing to come out. I actually had a feeling that it was going to come out during a scheduled power outage, and that's exactly what happened. And then the power didn't go out, so it turned out okay in the end. Yeah, we've definitely. Let me just ask this question: do you think the pendulum or the needle, in terms of proving that this specific person that you see behind me, do you think that that pendulum has shifted a little bit towards that he could be guilty? Was he shifted a lot in that direction, far more than you expected, based on what's in the affidavit? Look at what they've got: his cell phone number, his vehicle, a previous infraction, him coming and going around the crime scene the night of the crime, so making several circuits, and then also visiting at 12 separate times. And then worst of all, someone actually saw his eyebrows. And look at the image behind me. Look how his eyebrows stand out. I mean, compare his eyebrows to mine. Compare them to the officer that is standing next to him. I mean, those eyebrows really do stand out. His nose also stands out. His length, how tall he is, also stands out. So if you look at the two descriptors, besides that he was wearing black, besides that he was wearing a mask, it's funny, she doesn't mention anything about him holding a knife, seeing that he held a knife, seeing that there was blood on the knife, seeing what was on the floor after he walked away. Was he moving? Sorry, was he breathing hard? Was there any moisture on him? Was he sweating or anything like that? All she says is she saw his eyebrows and that he was tall, right? 5 foot, at least 5'10" or taller. So basically, she's describing the guy in the picture you see behind me based on eyebrows and how tall he is, and that's quite a good description. He does. You don't block it out to trauma when you do a interview. I mean, you don't, it's not quite like that. That's exactly it. And that is what I think the defense are thinking. Yeah, he is 6 foot tall. He is 6 foot tall. That is exactly what the defense are thinking. What are the jury going to think about D? And that is what they're going to try and put the focus on, right? You could have had exactly the same thing in the Chris Watts case. You could have a defense basically saying Nicole Kessinger committed the crime, and but that would be in a way conditional on Chris Watts wanting to throw her under the bus, and maybe he didn't. But potentially that could have been a defense. Whether it would have worked, I don't know, but it could have been a defense. And so you kind of have a similar situation here. The defense are going to look for something. And in the Caitlin Armstrong case, it's quite interesting what defenses they've come up with there. One of them is, couldn't it have been Mo's boyfriend? So it's not a love triangle, but a love rectangle. Things like that. Yeah, I mean, if you think about, was someone trying to commit the perfect crime? Do you think this was the perfect crime? He was actually seen by a witness. He left his DNA at the scene. He was caught within 49 days. He left like a paper trail of where his vehicle was. He left a paper trail of where his cell phone was. He left a paper trail of vehicle and cell phone that you were able to put them together. He showed his eyebrows when he committed the crime. Yeah, I mean, that's really the bottom line in a way, and it's quite sad to say that. We were asking that question anyway. How does it make sense that you call 911 or you don't call 911, and also you say that you think someone's unconscious? And that's why I say when you look at the dynamics of those videos, it's all very water off a duck's back. And so when something really serious happens, is it also that? It's a question. Is it like that? If it is, it's worrying. You could say she was in shock. You could say that. How long does shock last? Can you be paralyzed with shock for weeks, months? How does it work? Couldn't she just have spoken to B and said, B, can you call? Couldn't she just have said to B what she said to what's recorded in this affidavit? Yeah, Cash gets the award for the best, most consistent member. Well done. By the way, SM Kobelinsky, thanks so much for your excellent tracking of the plane yesterday. You know, we thought the affidavit was going to come out yesterday. I've also made SM Kobelinsky a mod, but can't really see her here. But are you here, SM Kobelinsky? It does look like his arrogance got the better of him, yeah. Did I mention the shoe print when I highlighted everything? That's also an important clue. Babette says, what if B was the one that found D unconscious? Suppose that's the defense needs to make a note of that. Or sorry, the prosecution, I guess, could maybe argue that. Alina says SM is awesome. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna sign off here. Thanks a lot, Blue Elvis. I'm going to sign off. I will be doing a follow-up where I'm just going to very succinctly summarize the 5 or 6 key points from the affidavit. I must say it's longer than I expected. I thought it would be less than 10 pages, and it's almost 20. So I was a little bit surprised that it had so much detail in it. But I think no one is more surprised than Brian Koberger. I think he was surprised by how much they knew, and I think that's the point. Don't you agree that the cops are actually playing dumb? You know, this whole idea that they don't even have a suspect. You had it in the headlines. Police don't have suspect, murder, don't have the murder weapon, they don't have a motive, they don't have the suspect. And I think at the moment it looks like we've got the suspect. We don't have the murder weapon, but we have the sheath in which it was found, which didn't you actually think at the time that's an awfully accurate description of the murder weapon, that it's a K-bar knife? Well, the only way you could say that is if you had the sheath, or if you knew exactly how those stab wounds were. But you remember it was absolutely clear that it was a K-bar knife right in the beginning. Quite interesting. So I think Brian was very, let's just put it in these words. The killer, I think, was very surprised. The killer reading this affidavit is probably very surprised by how much they knew. And given how they were saying all along, we don't actually even have a suspect, we don't know where he is. Do you remember that? And then suddenly, boom, right? And isn't that the idea? It's to make him relax. You don't want to have him flee the country like Caitlin Armstrong. You don't want him to be a threat to somebody next door to him. You want to make him think he's gotten away with it. And didn't he think that until maybe the first police stop or the second police stop? Did he start thinking, I don't know if I've gotten away with this anymore? Or did he think he had? Did he drive off from those 2 stops in Indiana with a bit of a smile on his face? Thanks a lot, Alien Dog. Thank you. Okay, let's have a last look at that poll. Wow, down to 68%. 68%. So about 2/3 of you think that it's not the work of a serial killer, and 1/3 of you think it is. Well, I guess time is going to tell. Time's going to tell. Cheryl says, I'm behind in chat. I believe the kids may have been selling something. Yeah, it could be. A lot of people say my voice is so comforting, but I also hear you've got the most boring voice. You sound like a 72-year-old from Pakistan or India or whatever. Anyway, to each his own. Do you have a link to the affidavit? I do. You can get it at this link. If you go into that news story, you'll find the affidavit at that link. So I hope that helps. Jean, is it Jean or Jean? John says the affidavit gave an abundance of info. Definitely did. Probably Jean, right? I've got another, this last thing I'm going to say, I got another person saying, you know what, I love your videos, but I always get caught on this thing where you say you're the most authentic voice in true crime. And how I sort of feel about that is, if you're a new person, I suppose it's okay, but if that irks you, you shouldn't be on this channel, because then you don't know me. You don't know my work. You don't know how I work. You don't know how my work stands out and stands apart from other channels. And if that sounds arrogant, you should also not be part of this channel. It's simply the way that it is. Like, if you go and look at the other channels, how many of them do you think are saying the roommates' names and, doing that whole thing? We are trying to do a good job and do the whole true crime thing in an ethical way. But I actually agree that I'm not the most authentic voice in true crime. I'm the most Van Gogh voice in true crime, which is to say, misunderstood. So yeah, I was looking at 3 channels. Each of us got 100,000 subs within weeks of each other. The difference between the 3 channels are, my channel had 24 million views to get to those 100,000 subs. The next channel had 19 million views, and the one after that had 14 million views. So who do you think worked the hardest to get to the 100,000 subs? The most Van Gogh voice in true crime. Yeah. And sometimes my voice needs a bit of help. So Dawn asked a good question. How many is a serial killer is someone who kills, and then there's a cooling off period, and then they kill again, right? It's not, you can't say killing 4 people, that's serial killer. It's killing one person. There's a cooling off period, which may be days, weeks, months, or years, and then they kill again. And it becomes kind of like an addiction. It's a good question. I would imagine it's 2 or 3, probably 3. Serial killer definition. It doesn't actually say. Okay, so it is 3 or more killings. So will you guys try and remember that? A serial killing is 3 or more killings, and yeah, it doesn't actually even say that it is. There's a cooling off period as part of that. That's the definition of a serial killer. Okay. Okay, final comments. Yeah, it's at least 3 or more. I'm not sure what I think about that statement. Anyway, it is what it is. Thanks, Stephanie. Stephanie, I hope your meeting today went okay. Terry, thanks a lot. It was you who actually told me that the probable cause affidavit had come out. So thanks a lot for that as well. Dawn says, I think there's a gray area in this. I think so as well. I think so as well. We're going to find out. I've already spoken about why I think where the motive lies and what lies underneath that motive. And some people really didn't like me saying that. But what creates the kind of person who, when they're in the real world, feel very uncomfortable? What kind of scenario creates a person who, when they are in a particular setting that they're not used to, it actually feels alien, it feels alienating, it doesn't feel warm, it feels unfriendly? What kind of person, what kind of situation creates a setting like that, where when you leave a certain situation and you go into another situation like college, you suddenly feel exposed. You suddenly feel you don't have the loving support that you used to. And so what can actually create that false cocoon where when you're out of it, suddenly the world is quite a nasty, unpleasant place, and then you actually don't like it very much. So just think about that. And that is not to blame anyone else. The blame for this crime is on the perpetrator, but just to explain the mechanism of how this perpetrator came to be the way he is. So that's really important to say. Thanks a lot, Josephine. And on that positive blue note, I'm going to bid you guys adieu. Stephanie, Terry says there was a slasher film the sister was in. I didn't get as far as to find out what it was. Shall I quickly just look at... Here it is. So I keep wanting to end off, and then there's one more thing. So have you guys seen this? Koberger's sister starred in a horror movie where young people get stabbed. You guys know that? And I guess, should we play this?
I got lost in the woods. It took them 2 days to find me. Since then, I've avoided the woods.
Until now.
We've learned that a group of forestry students are planning to go up the mountain and cut trees in protected woodlands.
So you mean to tell me that some companies willing to pay us $1,000 over fall break?
That's the deal. We leave Friday, 2 days to get there, 2 days work, and 2 days back.
You think those guys over there are really plotting the end of the world?
I'll bet whatever they are talking about is not good for the planet.
We need to follow them up there and document what they're doing.
Hey, how come only a half a dozen trees are marked?
No skid trails, no landing? That doesn't make any sense.
Where's Chase?
This is Emma, Steve, and Ben. Their friend got hurt.
I think it would be safer if we were to stay here. With people who know what they're doing.
What is it?
Cabin down there?
Maybe they have a phone.
Now, it's quite weird when you look at that image. Doesn't it look a bit like seeing that house, 112 King Road, through the trees?
Who has a phone out here, you jackass?
It's just a hunter's cabin. Season hasn't even started yet. There won't be anybody there.
I'm not leaving you!
So anyway, that was from the New York Post. Amanda Koberger appeared as Laurie in the 2011 flick 2 days back. So it came out 11 years ago, when Brian must have been quite a sort of in his formative years in a way, when Brian was 18. And it's about young students going in the woods and girls meet a grisly end. So there's that. Okay, guys, so I'll obviously be covering this and summarizing all of this stuff in future videos. Check it out. I just want to thank the mods for being here. Esimko Valinsky, Terry, Stephanie, Sharon, all of you guys, thanks so much. Welcome to the new subscribers. Thanks to the new members, and also thank you so much for the super chats. Also, thank you so much to you guys for bearing with me. I know this video was postponed over and over again, but eventually we got through it, and we are now where we are. We've got some certainty about the perpetrator. Unfortunately, there's a little bit of uncertainty about some other aspects as well. But as time goes by, we'll try and get get a trial date and start mapping what we know as well, and just clarify the affidavit in even more detail. So thanks again, guys. Take care, and I'll see you guys next time. Ciao.